So when I was in high school, I used to get together with friends on weekends, and every now and then we would play some flag football. And the guys who kind of put this together were my buddy John, his brother Dave, and their dad, Mr. Faber. Now, Mr. Faber was in his mid to late 40s, which at the time seemed very old to me, but now it's just kind of old. And he was definitely past his physical athletic prime. But there were certain things this man could do in certain sports that were just absolutely phenomenal. And one of those things happened to be throwing a football. The guy could throw the ball exactly when he wanted to, exactly where he wanted to whoever he wanted to. Didn't have the distance, situation, you name it. And so generally when you played football, you tried to end up on Mr. Faber's team, because usually that meant that you were going to win. Well, there was one time that we were playing, we had a pretty good game going. We usually played to 7 touchdowns. Whoever got 7 touchdowns first was the winner of that game. And so we were tied 6-6. I was on Mr. Faber's team, and we had the ball. And so we get in the huddle, and Mr. Faber asks, "Hey, has anybody here not caught a touchdown yet?" Somebody pointed out that I didn't have one. And so he goes, "All right, Steve, here's why is that surprising?" So Mr. Faber says, "All right, Steve, here's what I want you to do. I want you to line up outright, and as soon as I say hike, I want you to bump your man off the line. I want you to run towards the end zone. I want you to run with your hands out just like this. Don't look left, don't look right, just go straight ahead, keep your hands out just like this." And I was like, "All right, coach, you got it." So I line up outright, he calls hike, and I bump my man off the line, and I do exactly what he says. I just start running just like this. And as I'm approaching the end zone, I see this thing out of the corner of my eye. And I really want to look to see what it is, but Mr. Faber said not to look at anything, just to look straight ahead. And so that's exactly what I did. I just kept running straight ahead, looking straight ahead, and eventually, as my foot crosses the end zone, I realize that thing is a football, and that it is in my hands for a game-winning touchdown. Go me. And so, now any of you who have played sports or been around sports, you know that when something like that happens, the last minute catch, the big victory, you're allowed a certain amount of celebrating as a team that's allowed to go on, but you have to make sure you end it before it turns into kind of rubbing the other guy's face or taunting, all right? The only thing is, and some of you seem to already know this, these type of things don't really happen to me very often. And so when they do happen, I tend to go a little crazy, right? So we're all, celebrating, giving each other high fives and doing the stuff that guys do when they win and run the top out of here. And so the game's over, everybody's kind of, starting to get ready to go home. Some guys are in their cars, and I'm still running around. "Yeah, did you see that catch? Did you see it?" Of course they saw it. Just making a huge, big deal of this thing. And then my buddy John, who is Mr. Faber's middle son, good friend of mine, pulls me aside and goes, "You know that catch didn't have anything to do with you, right?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're just jealous. I bumped you off the line, I made the catch, and then everything to do with me." He goes, "Let me tell you what I saw happen there. My dad leaned over to me right before the play started and said, 'John, get out of his way, let him have this one.' And so when you bumped me off the line, that was me getting out of your way so you didn't trip over yourself." And then he pointed out, he's like, "Also, nobody makes a football catch like this, all right? That's not a thing." He was like, "The only reason you caught that ball is because my dad is just that good of a quarterback." And the funny thing is, as John is telling me his version of the story, I hated to admit it, but the details made a lot of sense. And so I went from having this awesome story, this moment of elation, "Yes, look at what I did," to, "Well, that kind of stinks." And I don't know if you ever had that happen, but maybe you've had this thing of, okay, once I get to this life stage, once I get this accomplishment, once I get this new purchase, or whatever this is, I'm finally going to feel like I'm happy. I'm finally going to feel like I did it, like I made it. And then you get to that stage, where you make that accomplishment, where you buy that. And it's not quite what you thought it would be. I mean, granted, yeah, it's great, it has its thrills, but that feeling that you thought you were going to have, that satisfaction that you thought was going to last, that story that was finally going to be worth telling, turns out you don't have it. Anybody ever done that? What if I were to tell you that no matter what you were to do with your life, whatever you could attain, accomplish, or acquire, that you would never actually have that feeling, that you would never actually have that story worth telling? And what if I were to tell you that just might be the single most freeing realization of your entire life? If you got your Bibles, I want you to open with me to Genesis chapter 1, the easiest chapter in the Bible to find. Genesis chapter 1, and we're just going to read the very first verse, the very first sentence of God's story. Here's what it says. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, before we get into our text and kind of break it down this morning, I'm just going to kind of give you everywhere that we're going, everything that I'm going to say. I'm going to give it to you right now in one sentence. And so if you've got your outlines, you can fill this in. Here we go. Every part of every story belongs to God. Every part of every story belongs to God. In this one sentence, this opening sentence from God's story, we're going to find out that God is both the author and the owner of every story in the world. He's the author of your story. He's the author of my story. He's the author of our world's story. He's even the author of his own story. And he is going to prove to us that his is the only story that is actually worth telling. Look at this phrase, in the beginning. In the beginning. The word beginning refers to time. And this is important because all of time belongs to God. All of time belongs to God. There was a certain time at which the story began, and there will be a certain date at which the story will end. And this is important because if the story starts with God at the beginning, then God is in control of time. Then God controls when things happen, and he has been in control of them since the very start. All of time belongs to God. I want you to imagine something for me, and some of you won't have to imagine because this is your life stage right now. But I want you to imagine that you have a teenage son or daughter living with you at home, and that you've decided that you're going to leave your teenager home next weekend while you go out on vacation or travel for work or whatever. Some of you kids are like, oh my gosh, I would love for that to happen. Some of you parents are like, there's no way on earth. All right? So you're going to leave your teenage son or daughter at home for the weekend. But let's say this coming Wednesday night at 9 p.m. you get an anonymous text. And it says that your teenage son or daughter is going to be throwing a massive drinking party at your house. How many of you are going to be happy about that? How many of you are going to strangle your kid? Now here's the thing. Here's the thing. You're going to be upset. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to feel hurt. You're going to feel betrayed, and rightly so, because your kid is basically lying to you by planning this behind your back. They're breaking the trust that you have with them. However, you're also going to realize that as bad as this is, listen, as bad as this is, there's still time. There's something that you can do about it. You're going to know that, okay, this is happening on Friday at 9 p.m. I have 2 days to either cancel my trip, decide to bring my kid with me, drop them off at a relative's house, whatever. You got options. Let's say, however, that instead of getting that text on Wednesday at 9 p.m., you get it on Friday at 11 p.m. Same text, same wording, at 9 p.m. on Friday, your kid is going to be having a massive drinking party at your house, except again, it's 11 p.m. on Friday, and you're just now getting this text. Chances are, rightly so, you are going to have an absolute freak-out moment, okay? You're going to be thinking in terms of, oh my gosh, what can I do? This is already happening. Am I going to be liable for stuff that happens? What condition are my kids in? What condition is my house in? What's going to happen as a result of my kids' actions? And you're going to be freaked out because it's too late. You're having to play catch-up. And see, it's really interesting. The same information coming to you at different times totally changes the way that you're going to respond. What's the difference? Time. See, if our story starts in the beginning, all this stuff happened, and then God showed up, and then God found out about it. For all we know, the rest of the story basically comes down to God playing defense. It's about God catching up with what's already happened. But because the story starts with God at the beginning, because God existed before anything ever happened, before the story itself ever existed, we know that God already knows the whole story. And this is important because unlike you or me, God never gets caught off guard. He never gets caught by surprise. I just have to tell you that the day that you were born did not catch God off guard and did not take you by surprise. The day that you got your first job did not catch God off guard or take you by surprise. The day that you got engaged or got married or had your first kid, they didn't catch God off guard or take you by surprise. Some of these things may have been very pleasant surprises for you, all right? But they didn't surprise God. Why? Because all of time belongs to God. In fact, every part of every story belongs to God. The day that you got your diagnosis did not catch God off guard or taken by surprise. The day that you got your layoff notice did not catch God off guard or taken by surprise. The day that you got into that accident, the day that person walked out of your life, the day that you lost that person that was so close to you, did not catch God off guard or taken by surprise. These may have been very unpleasant surprises to you, but they didn't surprise God. Why? Because all of time belongs to God. In fact, every part of every story belongs to God. In the beginning, all of time belongs to God. In the beginning, God created. Creation refers to things. And this is significant because all things belong to God. All things belong to God. This doesn't just mean man-made things like your car or your clothes. This includes the air that you breathe and the light that you see and the weeds in your yard and the hair on your head and the people in your life. You're a thing. I'm a thing. Everybody here is a thing. And all things belong to God. Let me ask you, does anybody willing to admit that you have some type of weird fear or phobia? There's something in your life, something whenever you see it or come into contact with it that you just absolutely get freaked out? Let me tell you what mine is. I am absolutely terrified of bees. I am just petrified by bees. In fact, there was one time that Marianne and I were out on our back porch, and I happened to be holding the baby at the time, and a bee came near me, and I almost threw her, like she was about to go airborne. And I just want you to know, I would love to tell you that it was this brave, protective, oh no, save the baby, but it was, no, take her! I am just absolutely terrified of bees. Another kind of weird thing about me, I don't know exactly where this comes from, but I love getting to go online and reading articles about things that celebrities are afraid of. Some of you might be familiar with the guy, Matthew McConaughey. I think we got his picture up somewhere. Matthew McConaughey is a pretty famous actor. He's been in a lot of movies. Matthew McConaughey's big phobia, his big fear, revolving doors. Revolving doors. I always feel so normal when I find out the stuff that other people are afraid of. He won't use them. He won't go near them. He tries not to use normal doors that are near revolving doors. He's just absolutely terrified of revolving doors. Anybody have anything like that you're just absolutely terrified of? I'd love to hear about this someday. Have you ever wondered where that fear comes from? Where that feeling of terror of just like these somewhat normal things comes from? You want to know where that's from? I'll tell you what. The only reason that you and I are ever afraid of any object or any animal or any person is because we have bought into this idea that that thing, whatever it is ultimately in control of what it does or how it's used. And that's simply not the case. How do we know? Because all things belong to God. Now again, you and I know that there are certain things that exist in our world that should only be used in certain ways, or that when used by certain people have the potential, to cause harm to themselves or others, right? But you have to understand that no object, no animal, no person is ever completely in control of what it does or how it's used. Why? Because all things belong to God. Now you know from your life, and I know from my life, that God sometimes allows people to do things that don't advance his agenda, and that God even allows the devil to get access to certain people or certain things and to use them to advance his agenda. And maybe someday you and I can have a discussion about whether God causes those things to happen or allows them to happen, and whether or not that makes any difference, right? But the point is that there is nothing that God has created or allowed to be discovered that God does not strongly desire to use to tell his story. And again, this doesn't just give you license to live like an idiot under the false pretense that God's not going to make you suffer for your own actions. He will. But it does mean that you don't have to be afraid of any animal, any object, any person, anything in this entire world. You don't have to live in fear of, I have to make sure I stay away from this thing. I can never come into contact with this or it will ruin my life. Why? Because all things belong to God. The fact that all things belong to God is also why, and many of you have already found this, at no point in your life will entering that new life stage, or getting that promotion, or having that accomplishment, or making the new purchase ever really satisfy you. Maybe you've known someone who bought the new house, or who got the new car, or who has the new job, or who just moved into this new place. And the truth is, they're kind of miserable. In fact, sometimes they're just kind of miserable to be around. Why does that happen? It's not that stuff is bad. It's not that having stuff is bad. It's that that person is trying to claim something as their own and use it for their purposes when God has clearly said, that is mine, and I want to use it for my purposes. Now again, you can have nice things. You can have nice things in your life and not be controlled by them, as understand that they're not yours, but rather God's. For example, I've got a buddy who lives pretty far from here at this point. He has, like, his car that he drives back and forth to work and runs errands with is a legit race car, okay? He had to get, like, this special engine put in it, and a special hood for the special engine, and the thing looks like a little bit of a spaceship. It's got pipes and stuff going all over it. He's put a ton of time and a ton of money into this thing, but the reason that he's done it, the reason that he says he's done it, is because obviously he's got, a passion for motorsports, but what he gets to do with this car, he gets to bring it to car shows and enter it in competitions, right? And it allows him to build relationships with people that he knows desperately need Jesus. People that are not going to come to church with him on a Sunday morning because they're kind of doing their racing thing. And so he tries to meet them where they're at and just kind of get to know them, hear their stories, and hopefully when the time is right, maybe get to tell them a little bit about who he thinks Jesus is and why he thinks Jesus is so important to him. Now, I just need to mention before we move on, I just need to make sure that you understand this, all right? Because this is really important. I firmly believe, and this is something that Marianne and I really tried to embrace with our lives, I firmly believe that if you have something like that hobby or that item, that device, whatever, that allows you to get access, to certain people and to do certain things, I firmly believe, and this is absolutely biblical, that you should never own something that you would not be willing to lend to somebody who needed it. And here's why. If you remember when we were together like this a few months ago, we talked about what the most important thing in the Bible is. Everything that God ever said in the Old Testament, Jesus was asked, what does it really boil down to? What's the most important thing? And Jesus said that you would love God with your whole self and love your neighbor as yourself. And I just have to tell you again, this is just kind of me talking with you, being honest with you. If there's something that you own that you cannot bear lending to someone, letting someone else borrow when they need it, that thing is necessarily more important to you than that person, and chances are it's more important than God. And remember, it's not your stuff anyway. Why? Because all things belong to God. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to acquire things or trying to get things because they'll never be your things anyway, because they already belong to God. You don't have to think in terms of, I have to get this, I must have this, or my life is never going to be complete. It's never going to be complete if you do have that. Why? Because all things belong to God. In fact, every part of every story belongs to God. In the beginning, all of time belongs to God. In the beginning, God created. All things belong to God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And this is important because all places belong to God. All places belong to God. I'm going to tell you a story. You're not going to believe it's true, but I give you my word that it is. Never good when I have to start that premise. When I was in high school, I went to a school with about 1,600 or 1,700 students. And the school that I went to happened to have a program for students who were blind or low vision. Now, one of our students who happened to go to the school as well, he grew up in a little bit of a rough neighborhood, had kind of a rough life, had a lot of involvement in and access to things that teens just have no business being involved in. And one of those things was that he both had access to and used a handful of illegal drugs. Another student who was also very low vision told him, hey, I would like to buy some drugs from you sometime. And so these kids decided the next day at school they were going to make this exchange of the money for the drugs, and they made the exchange, and then they were promptly expelled. They made it right in front of a hall monitor. I didn't get to ask them this because they were already gone by the time I found out that all this had gone down. I feel like what they did is they probably thought, well, if we can't see anyone else, they can't see us, right? Wrong. Now, I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds absolutely bizarre. But the truth is, you and I do this all the time, don't we? When deciding whether or not to do something, we ask questions like, is my wife going to find out? Are my parents going to find out? Is my boss going to find out? Can I cover it up? Can I get away with it? Can I delete the browser history? I just have to ask, is that really what's most important to you? You can say all that you want about grace and freedom and love and forgiveness, and I want you to know that I believe in those things, and I'm for those things, but I just have to say that all of time belongs to God. All things belong to God. All places belong to God. There is no place that you will ever go in which God is not right there with you. And so I just have to ask, do you want that God fighting for you or against you? How many of you have seen the Batman movie, The Dark Knight? It came out a few years ago. All right, some people have. There's a scene in The Dark Knight where one of the guys who works for Wayne Enterprises, right? Bruce Wayne is a very rich guy. He owns Wayne Enterprises. Well, and he also happens to be Batman, but he tries to keep that a secret. One of the employees of Wayne Enterprises figures out, he finds some documents that cause him to realize that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And then another employee of Wayne Enterprises, Lucius Fox, is basically Batman's right-hand man. That he designs stuff for him, like the Batmobile. And so this guy finds these documents, he puts it all together and realizes that Bruce Wayne's Batman and that this guy, Lucius Fox, is his assistant. And so he goes to Lucius Fox and he says, I know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. I know that you are his personal assistant, that you design things like the Batmobile. And in order to keep this secret, in order to keep this out of the newspapers and the tabloids, I want $10 million a year for the rest of my life. Something like that, like that too. Yeah. I want you to see how Lucius Fox responds to this guy's blackmail request.
Let me get this straight. You think that your client, one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the world, is secretly a vigilante who spends his nights beating criminals to a pulp with his bare hands? And your plan is to blackmail this person? Good luck.
Keep that.
I love how he thinks that he's got this like awesome, golden ticket idea. Yes, this is what's gonna, I'm gonna be set for the rest of my life. And you see it just turn into absolute sheer terror as he's kind of processing the implications of the ultimatum he's just given Lucius Fox. And I know that's pretty funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, why would anybody do that? And yeah, I just have to throw this out there. That some of you believe that as long as you show up at church on Sunday, put some money in the offering plate, volunteer to sign up when there's needs every now and then, that the rest of your life is really none of God's business. That you can do whatever you want with your time, your money, your stuff. You can do, with whoever, however you want to do it, because that part of your life, it's really none of God's business. You take care of your God stuff, He should leave alone the rest of your stuff. And I don't know about you, but I can just imagine sitting across from Lucius Fox and hearing him say, all time belongs to God. All things belong to God. All places belong to God. And you're telling him that what you do with your time, your body, your money, your sex life, your home, your stuff is none of his business? Good luck. And again, this is not angry God, turn or burn type stuff. Right? The fact that all places belong to God is actually very good news for you and me, and here's why. I don't know about you, I absolutely hate it when I'm talking on the phone with somebody and I lose my signal. That's like my number one pet peeve. Well, for whatever reason, Marianne and I don't get very good cell reception in our house. I don't know if it's just where we're located or what it's made of or whatever. So whenever I do get a call, I always try to make sure that I answer it and that I can hear that person, because I know that if I move or whatever, I might lose the call. So I'm walking out on our back porch. I'm going to take the trash out. I've got a trash bag in this hand, and I've got my phone in this pocket. And as I'm walking out on the back deck, my phone starts to ring, and so I kind of set the trash bag down, and I go to answer my phone, and I do it, but I'm kind of off balance like this. But it's a call that I really need to take. And I know that if I move, I might lose it. So I just sort of tried to stand there and talk for as long as I could, just like this. I'm kind of, bouncing around doing one of these, because I know that if I move like this or like this, that might be the end of the call. So it's getting to be kind of a long phone call, and my leg is starting to fall asleep, but I don't want to lose this guy, because it's a very important thing that we need to talk about. And so at one point, some of you know where our house is in relation to the pastor's house. At one point, Austin parks in his parking spot. He starts walking towards his house, and he sees me, on the phone like this. And he walks over and goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm the phone." And I stood there literally just like frozen in time, because I didn't want to lose the signal, and I know that all it takes is the slightest of all movements, and my signal will be gone. I have to wonder, though, how many Christians have seen God show up in their lives in just the right way, at just the right time, seen Him provide the job the moment that they needed it, seen Him provide the place to live right before they were going to get kicked out of where they were living, and they've seen Him do these awesome things, and yet, if you look at their life as a whole, it's almost like they're frozen in time. Anytime that they feel that God towards the next step or a new chapter, they refuse to consider it. They refuse to see if it's really what he wants them to do. They'll avoid it at all costs. Why? They're afraid that they'll lose their signal. They're afraid that if they make a move, if they take a risk, that God will be able to provide for them. That God will be able to meet their needs. And it's almost like God is saying to them, what I did for you before, that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. I was just getting started. And yet no matter what he does, no matter how clear he makes it, no matter how obvious it is, they won't move. They won't listen. They're frozen in time. Because they're afraid they'll lose their connection with him. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to get this. All places belong to God. All of them. There is nowhere on this earth, in this universe, in this galaxy, however far you can travel, that God will not be with you. There are no dead zones when it comes to your relationship with God. There is no place that you can go and no experience that you can go through that God is not right there with you. And so maybe you felt God asking you, well, would you consider a change in geography? Would you consider a change in career? Would you consider a change in how you view your time or your stuff? And maybe you've responded, I can't. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too busy. I'm too stressed. I'm too scared. I don't know what I do. I don't know where I live. I don't know where I get my groceries. I don't know who my friends would be. And it's like God saying, hey, I provided those things for you here. I can provide them for you there. I just need you to know that if you felt God saying that to you, if you felt him in any way leading you to believe that it's time for a change in your life, you can know with confidence that he is going to be with you and that he is going to provide for you. How do you know that? Because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All time belongs to God. All things belong to God. All places belong to God. In fact, every part of every story, every part of your story, every part of my story, every part of every person that's ever lived, every part of their story belongs to God. So let me ask you, you know that feeling of frustration that you've gotten, that we talked about earlier, about how no matter what life stage you enter, or what goal you accomplish, or what purchase you make, that it never really seems to satisfy you? Do you want to know where that comes from? And do you want to know how to deal with it? The cause is actually really simple. It's that whether you realize it or not, you're trying to claim certain things to be yours, when in reality they belong to God. You ever have this thought of, this is not what I want to be doing with my time. I don't like doing this with my time. What if instead of focusing on that thought, what if you were to turn that into a question? God, is this what you want me to be doing with my time? And if so, will you help me to find joy in it? Why is that a better question? I'll tell you why. Because it's his time anyway. And in asking that question, you're simply giving back to God something that's already his. The whole phrase, my time, that's not even a thing. It's God's time. It belongs to him. You ever looked at your life, whether it's your stuff or your health or your family or whatever, and thought, these aren't the things that I want in my life. I want more things. I want new things. I want different things. You ever had that thought? What if you were to turn that thought into a question? And what if the question was, God, am I using the things that you've given me in the way that you want me to use them? Let me tell you why that's a better question. Because they're his things anyway. And in asking that question, you're just giving back to him something that already belongs to him. You ever have this thought, I'm never going to be happy as long as I live here, as long as I work here, until I can move there, get that job, whatever. I'm never going to be happy until I can do that. What if instead of complaining about wherever it is that you live or wherever it is that you work, what if you were to ask the question, God, is this where you want me to be? If so, I'm going to stay, and if not, I'm going to go. Why is that a better approach? Because all places belong to him anyway. And in asking that question, you're just giving back to him something that already clearly belongs to him. I just want to ask a question. Can you imagine if the Jesus followers in our area were to say, God, my time belongs to you, I'll do with it whatever you want me to do. If the Jesus followers in our area were to say, God, my things belong to you, I'll do with them whatever you want me to do. God, my places belong to you. I'll go wherever you want me to go. You tell me where to go, that's where I'm going to go. Can you imagine what God would do in our community? Can you imagine the way that he would start to transform families and people and just our town as a whole. Do you think that it's possible that we would start to see something awesome happen here? Not from some outside force coming in and saying, okay, this is how we're going to, but just from the Jesus followers in our area saying, God, the stuff that I'm putting in his mind, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to give it to you. Why? Because it already belongs to you. Do you think that we would see change happen? Do you think that we would see healing happen? Do you think that we would see lives restored and people made whole? I do. I just have to tell you that if you were to choose that instead of trying to dictate to God what your life is supposed to be like in terms of time, things, and places, and if you were to ask God, what do you want my life to look like? Well, how do you want the chapters of my story to read? It would not be long, not long at all, before you would start to look at your life and look at the things that you've been a part of and the things that you've done and know with confidence that you finally have a story worth telling.